Well, welcome once again to Fred and John Talks. And John came up with the idea of the question, what gets your goat? I'm going to throw a curveball at you, John. And of course, you know I speak baseball terminology, right?
Yeah, you're an old pro.
But let me explain about curveballs. So the only curveball that is worth hitting is what's called a hanging curveball. So this is how a curveball normally comes in. Let me point you to the audience.
Show it to the YouTube.
It starts out straight and then it curves. It curves.
Curves down or to the side?
Curves to the side and down.
Oh my God.
But a lot of times pitchers make mistakes and it doesn't curve. It hangs up in the air. And that's a beautiful pitch to hit. It's called a hanging curveball. But when I played ball, I preferred the faster it came in, the faster it went out. But I'm gonna throw you a curveball today, not a fastball.
I bet you couldn't hit the balls. Those pitchers today are throwing at 105.
Oh, I didn't play Major League Baseball. I'm talking about when I was a schoolboy.
Okay.
Yeah. No. Okay, so you ask what gets my goat. Well, the curveball is right around the corner. So I'll start off with what gets my goat, and then I'll segue into the curveball. So what gets my goat is, you know the saying, the poor get poorer and the rich get richer, right?
Sure, yeah.
Well, I want to focus on the first part. The poor seem to get poorer. And by analogy, the lonely seem to get lonelier. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of happily married friends, including yourself. And I've been married before, and even though I got divorced for many years, I was happy. But I had friends who had no one, and they were lonely. But I'm a poster child for loneliness now. Didn't marry till I was 37, experienced a lot of loneliness, even though I had friends, most of them married. And then I got divorced 8 years ago, and I've been alone ever since. But mine is not the story I want to tell today. I know a woman who was married for 2 years back in the 1970s. She recovered, moved on, dated a lot, but never found anyone, never remarried or had children, which was one of her deepest longings, to have children. Now she's 75 years old and has led a very lonesome life. That woman is my sister.
Oh gosh, now that you identified it, I remember you talking about your sister.
And now here comes the curveball. When we're talking about the topic of loneliness, the more appropriate question is, Fred, what breaks your heart? It breaks my heart to be chronically lonely. It breaks my heart that my sister is still alone and is such a good person, has so much to give, so much love to give. I have a great advantage over her in that I have so many friends, and that does, to a certain extent, fill the gap and help you stay more mentally healthy. It's about human connections, which you and I talk about all the time.
All the time, yes.
Moving on to the second thing that breaks my heart. As you know, I've been a mental health professional for 32 years. It breaks my heart, the current state of our mental health system, in quotes, and I use the term loosely because it's in a shambles.
I want to jump in there for just a second, Fred. You say currently, and I'll tell you, as a practicing physician, it was a shambles in the 90s, after 2000. I mean, it's been in shambles for a long, long time. In our community, even, we don't even have an inpatient facility anymore in our local hospital.
I know that.
We're talking about decades. Currently means decades.
I know that, but it has gotten worse in recent years, and I'll illustrate that with a story, maybe two stories. When I first moved here in 1995, we are in 2024 now, so that's almost 30 years ago. There was an inpatient program for minors, up to 17 years old, children and adolescents, there was an inpatient psychiatric unit on the campus of Winchester Medical.
I remember it. Yeah.
It was called Hearst House.
Yes.
I'm not good friends with, but I'm an acquaintance of mine, a psychiatrist, Dr. Don Lee. He was the head of the program. Mm-hmm. They shut it down a few years later because guess what? It didn't make money.
Yes.
The system, is run by the bottom line. It's very insurance driven. I have clients who, when I refer them to a psychiatrist, sometimes can't get a first appointment for 3 to 6 months and suffer unnecessarily.
And they may not even be locally. Sometimes they have to go out of town.
Yeah.
Or to University of Virginia or something.
Oh, and you gave me an opening to my second story. So I had a client, 15-year-old girl. This was years ago, but I'll never forget this. She was suicidally depressed. There was nothing here in Winchester, inpatient. So she got evaluated, and she was sent to a hospital that is a 3-hour drive from here. Her parents had to go down for family counseling meetings, drive 3 hours. They came back, came to a session. The girl was still in the hospital. They said, Fred, we drove down there 3 hours and had a 20-minute counseling session. And they said, I'm sorry, we have another family waiting in the waiting room. We have to see them. 20 minutes is not a counseling session, even in outpatient. But in inpatient, it should be an hour and a half.
Well, certainly for adolescents.
With the money you're paying for the inpatient?
Adolescents need more than 20 minutes with a counselor.
Yeah. So that's another thing that breaks my heart. Not that it doesn't break my heart for adults, but at least they have more availability, more beds for adults for psychiatric reasons. So that breaks my heart.
So this segment really is not about what gets your goat, but about what breaks your heart.
Yeah.
It kind of does get my goat that we don't have and haven't gotten an improved mental health system.
Well, don't get me wrong. It does get my goat, but it goes even deeper than that. It breaks my heart. Because of what I see and hear every day that I work.
Yes.
It's ongoing. And it's worsening.
Well, that is going to lead into what we're going to talk about next. So I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to point out about our mental health system that's broken and fragmented? And
not at this time. We'll do that again in the future. We've done other videos on mental health. We'll do more. But I want to focus on the first one that I mentioned about loneliness. Did you, because I don't want to monopolize here, did you have some things you wanted to say about loneliness? You talked about short-term loneliness, and I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, short-term loneliness. Quite recently, there's been some talk about short-term loneliness or intermittent loneliness, and that can lead to, apparently, in some research papers, the consequences, health consequences of that are depression, sleep disorders, nausea, anxiety, and of course, we now know that chronic loneliness can have major health problems. I think it's as high as 29% increase in mortality for heart disease, 30-odd% in terms of stroke, almost 50% increase in mental health deterioration, dementia. So
to piggyback on that, I've read that, and I do have a personal story about this. I might be repeating myself, but it's worth repeating. That long-term loneliness, especially among men who, by either they're widowed, divorced, never married, who age out alone. More physical medical problems, more doctor visits, more psychiatric problems, more psychiatric medications, higher rates of mortality, and higher rates of suicide. Back right before COVID started in 2020, when people were still meeting in person, I went to a conference on aging and health that is both physical and mental health and aging. Mm-hmm. And about halfway through the day, actually it was after our lunch break, we came back, and He said, I want to talk to you about lonely old men who, yeah. So whether through widowhood, divorce, or never married,
Yeah,
he said, I have bad news and worse news.
I remember this. Yeah.
Okay. He said, the bad news is men who grow old alone have more health problems, more psychiatric problems, higher rates of mortality, and suicide. He said, the worst news is those of them who smoke and drink alcohol have even higher rates of mortality, more heart disease, more psychiatric problems, and higher rates of suicide. I turned to the person next to me, didn't even know them, and I said, I'm screwed. Because I do both.
You're challenging it every day, right?
Smoke and drink.
Well,
Here's to you, folks.
You brought up the word aging, and I want to talk to you about loneliness, Fred. Recently, I read an article about short-term loneliness, leading to headaches, fatigue, nausea, ultimately depression. It was actually a study done by produced by Penn State Health and Human Services in their Penn State University in Pennsylvania. And it also included some studies done by their Center for Healthy Aging. And it involved 1,538 subjects, and it goes over 10 years. And they did several interviews during that time for individuals between 35 and 65. So this is the adults you're talking about. It's not. This is not about adolescents.
Well, we would call
children.
Nowadays middle age because people are living so long.
Well, I'm middle aged at my age. I'm not going to say my age.
81.
But,
oh, did I say that?
This study was also funded by the National Institute of Health, and like I said, it went on for 10 years, and it ended in June of 2024. And what's interesting is that the June 10 to 16 was Loneliness Awareness Week. I think you and I missed that in 2024, it was actually a week of the calendar year that was a Loneliness Awareness Week.
Didn't even know that.
Well, this article, which was published in Health Psychology, was published on the 13th of 2024 of June. It confirmed basically what our Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, had been talking about in 2023 when he put out a public service, alarm alert to the public for the country.
Epidemic of loneliness.
Epidemic of loneliness. And you and I have talked before with our YouTube fans that America is behind England and several other countries, but there is hope out there because your famous state of Connecticut has now legislated into their legislature to be able to address loneliness, whether it's in their health and human services, their transportation department. It's part of the Connecticut state government.
Yeah.
And this is an invitation to other states to take up the cause that the Surgeon General has put out there last year as a public health epidemic.
Yeah.
So some of the conclusions they came up with for short-term loneliness, Fred, is that it can be variable every day, and some people who may not even identify as being lonely can experience loneliness. And if they don't have connections, they don't have a way to contact people, or they don't have a friend they can talk to, or they don't have an organization they can commit time to.
A support system.
If they don't have a support system, then they're likely to go into and flow into longer-term loneliness.
And they fall between the cracks.
They fall between the cracks. But this paper is purposely trying to say that there is such a thing as short-term loneliness. One of the other findings by one of the authors was that loneliness is not just binary. You either are lonely or you aren't. It's got all these subtleties in between. It can depend on all types of mood, all types of circumstances you're involved in with your family and with your life and with your work. And so it can be really a moment to moment thing, which is why you and I pointed out before, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, stay in touch with people, because you don't know what's going in their life that day. I mean, they may have been having a whole week of great, great life situations, and then the next day they're down.
Well, it has a parallel to mental health, Talk
Sure.
about the subject, You never know what's going on behind closed doors or what's going on behind a facade, because people, are sometimes ashamed of their mental health issues, ashamed of their loneliness.
Yes.
It brings to mind, people. This story got told to me by a person who was a veteran of AA and the 12 steps. Actually, I don't know where this fits in, but maybe I just wanted to get it out there. But it's about the lonely. Not only addicts, but including addicts. They have a saying, because they identify as having pity parties a lot. And it goes like this: poor me, pour me a drink.
Well, but the thing is, people who become addicted to things very likely were part of the lonely pool of people.
They're trying to fill a void.
Yes, they're trying to fill a void.
Now, I can give you some quotes about long-term loneliness if you want.
Yeah, make it short, because I want to finish with something that. Remember, we were talking the other day about extraordinary prayer. Did I tell you about that?
Why don't you go take it from there?
Okay. I'm going to give a shout out to a church up in Boalsburg, Pennsylvania. It's Calvary Baptist Harvest Fields Church in Boalsburg. It's a Baptist church called Calvary Baptist in Harvest Fields, Pennsylvania, in Boalsburg, in the town of Boalsburg. I listened to a sermon last Sunday when I was visiting my daughter, and the pastor said he wanted the congregation to go out and do 40 days of extraordinary prayer. I thought, well, what is that? Well, he explained it very, very well. And one of the aspects of extraordinary prayer, he said, was to go around and pray for your friends and your neighbors in their presence, if at all possible. Not just pray from home, not just pray in church, but to go to their house, even if it means standing on their stoop or their porch and asking if you can just pray for them. Another aspect of it was to pray for your community. And he talked about that in terms of driving around your community and actually purposely stopping in front of each home.
Oh, that's lovely.
And praying for the people in that home, the children in that home. What really got my attention was he said, go to situations and locations where there's been mishap, mayhem and shootings and really catastrophe. Tragedy. Go park in the school parking lots of elementary schools, high schools, colleges. Sit there and think and pray about the administration, the students, the parents, during this time of summertime when there's nobody there. It's quiet. Sit in the parking lot and concentrate on this school. It's who's going to be coming to that school. I thought it was very, very.
I'm beginning to see what extraordinary prayer is.
It's extraordinary prayer, and I'd say go out there and give extraordinary prayer to anybody you think is suffering from loneliness.
That's very commendable of him.
I think that's probably enough for this segment. I wanted to make sure that our friends out there in YouTube land, if you live around Boalsburg, PA, or State College, PA, you might want to look up the Calvary Baptist Harvest Fields Church.
I have a question.
That's a wrap.
Yes, sir, Mr. Cameraman.
This is Sohail. Yeah, we talk about loneliness and all the issues and how it's come about. Is there any research going on in why it's happening? What is causing the loneliness? I have my theories about it.
Okay.
But is there a proper research going on? Maybe we can do another talk about this. But I just wanted to throw in a curveball at you guys.
Start by saying that I read some years ago. This is old news. More Americans are living alone now than at any other time since they began taking the census.
But why?
A lot of divorce,
Okay.
death, never marrieds, people who never had children.
Economics has brought about children and adolescents and young people living in their homes with their parents still. That's
Someone very dear to me is 75 years old and unmarried and never had children, leads a very lonesome life.
Could it be because in modern life, we've changed the concept of family? And what does a family constitute? Is it what we call a core family? A husband and a wife and one or two children making it out into the world on their own, as opposed to traditions all over the world that family is extended family.
Yeah.
You got to include grandparents in the family, both sides. The children have to live. It takes a village to grow a child, correct?
correct.
You
And
make
we're
me
divorced from that.
You make me nostalgic for my childhood. I grew up in a large extended Italian American family. I was one of 19 grandchildren on my father's side alone. We were always together. I felt so secure. Now I look around me. I don't see these big families. I don't see the grandparents. Everybody lives in different states. This man has to travel to Pennsylvania and New York to see his grandchildren, which I commend him for, and he does better than a lot of grandparents. But we lived, a couple miles from each other, and we're always together.
But that feeling you just expressed, Fred, of feeling in a cocoon or feeling a warmth, I remember that even at my stage and age of living in Kansas, being only about 15 miles away from my mother's sister and her family and cousins. And we were always together having reunions, getting together. And I don't have that now. I don't have that same sense of community or family. I mean, I have a church family, but I don't consider that as strong a community as family.
And this is why I have put so much energy into having a monthly men's group that comes for Fire Pit Night, a group that you're part of both of them, a prayer group. I have a prayer group that meets on Monday. I have all kinds of friends. But there's one more thing that we're leaving out. Electronics and social media and this artificial connectedness. I'm sorry, I don't mean to mock Facebook or, blame anybody, but I'm not a Facebook person, but when I've heard about how many friends does so-and-so have on Facebook? 445. That's not friendship.
You're lucky to have one good friend.
That's not connection. The scriptures say, let your acquaintances be many, but one in 1,000 your bosom friend. And what they're saying is, acquaintances, it's nice to know people, but friendship takes time. It develops over time. It's closeness.
You have to cultivate it.
Another verse is, he or she who has found a bosom friend has found a treasure that's priceless. We don't have that as much as we did in past generations.
Yes, and Fred, you were talking about growing up in a larger family. I had the same when I grew up. I had my uncles and aunts, my cousins, everybody was around you, and they supported each other. We all grew up together. We were up to mischief together. We were up to getting scolded together. That kind of life is gone now because modern life emphasizes so much on that core family,
and
individuality and even competition within the family, which really breaks it up. And I feel sorry for my children, my grandchildren, because of that.
When I'm feeling loneliest, that's where my thoughts go back to. And let me add, they go back to my family and my memories of being with my cousins, aunts and uncles, grandparents, but they also go back to some of the really close friendships I had. When I was a young boy playing Little League Baseball, Me and my family were close with my baseball coach. We used to go over there swimming and have cookouts and everything. And they were like second parents to me. I called them Mom and Pop Fecto. Their last name was Fecto. It's a French name. So I grew up with all this closeness of family and so many kids in the neighborhood. You were never alone. Sometimes you wanted to be because you were so,
So we got fragmentation of families, but we're going to hopefully make that better by doing our videos. We love doing this, and we hope that our YouTube fans will continue to check us out and watch us and subscribe. And we'll wrap with that.
Okay, buddy.
Okay, buddy. Ciao.
Ciao.